A family of four drove into a motel in 1988 and vanished forever. The police found no witnesses, but they were wrong. For 35 years, the only one who knew the truth was parked in a dark barn, unable to speak. Tonight, I tell their story, because I am their car. I am a vessel of memories, forged of steel and glass. My official designation is a 1988 Ford Country Squire, wood paneling on my flanks, but the family who gave me purpose called me the Wanderer. My world was the hum of my V8 engine, the scent of summer air through open windows, and the weight of their lives within me. I remember David Bennett, his calloused hands firm on my steering wheel, the faint smell of coffee and determination on his breath. I remember Laura, her laughter like wind chimes, her habit of resting her bare feet on my dashboard, tracing patterns in the dust. And the children, they were my beating heart. Chloe, at 8, was a universe of questions and scraped knees, her voice a constant, curious hum. 6-year-old Sam was her quiet shadow, his small fingers often sticky with the remnants of a lollipop, leaving faint prints on my rear windows, maps of a world he was just beginning to see. That last good day, the sun was a brilliant, molten gold over the plains of Wyoming. We were moving, a grand migration from the clipped lawns of Ohio to the promised green of Oregon. The air inside me was thick with hope, a tangible thing you could almost taste. Chloe was in the back, reading a comic book aloud, her voice rising and falling with the drama of superheroes. Sam was asleep, his head pillowed on a worn stuffed elephant. David and Laura were singing along to a song on the radio, their voices slightly off-key, but perfectly in sync. I remember the feel of the road, the rhythmic thump of the tires on the expansion joints of the interstate, a steady, reliable pulse. I was more than a machine. I was their sanctuary, their rolling home, carrying their past in the trunk and their future in the front seat. In a later interview, a retired highway patrolman named Elias Boone would describe this exact stretch of road. He called it the hypnosis zone. He said, "You drive for 8 hours, nothing but sky and asphalt. The mind starts to drift. You're not just moving through space, you're moving through your own life. You think about the job you left, the new one you're starting. You replay arguments, you plan futures. The car becomes a confession booth, a meditation chamber. It's the most vulnerable place in the world." And the Bennetts were vulnerable. They were suspended between two lives, their entire world contained within my steel frame. As dusk began to bleed purple and orange across the horizon, David made a decision. A desire for a quiet night, away from the drone of the highway. He turned me off the interstate onto a 2-lane road that cut a lonely line through the sagebrush. The sign was weathered and barely legible. Havenwood, 15 miles. I felt the change immediately. The smooth ribbon of asphalt gave way to a rougher, patched surface. The world outside grew quieter, darker, the vast emptiness of the high desert pressing in on all sides. The singing stopped. A different kind of silence settled inside me, not of peace, but of anticipation. I did not know then that the steady, comforting rhythm of the road was over. I was being guided into the dark, and I was about to become a keeper of a silence far deeper and more permanent than the quiet of a desert night. The town of Havenwood was little more than a whisper on the landscape. A dozen buildings huddled together against the vastness, their lights small and fragile against the encroaching dark. At the edge of town stood the Sparrow Creek Motel, its neon sign flickering a tired, buzzing welcome. A vacancy sign glowed in the window of the small office. I remember the crunch of my tires on the gravel as David pulled me into a parking spot directly in front of their designated room, number 7. He turned my engine off, and the silence that rushed in was absolute. For a moment, we all just sat there, encased in the residual warmth of my engine. Then the doors opened, and they were gone, their voices and the slam of my doors echoing briefly in the cold night air before being swallowed by the quiet. From my vantage point, I could see the man who ran the place. He came out of the office to greet them, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. His name, they would learn, was Silas Croft. He was a tall, stooping man with eyes that seemed too small for his face, but his smile was wide and immediate. I could not hear his words, but I saw his gestures, warm, welcoming, a caricature of hospitality. He laughed, and David laughed with him. He patted Sam on the head. From my cold metal shell, I registered only the external facts, but I am a vessel of sensation. As he drew near, a strange scent reached me, cutting through the clean, dry air of the desert. It was the smell of stale oil, sweet pipe tobacco, and something else, something metallic and cloying that I did not have a name for. It was the scent of a place that is never properly aired out, of things kept too long in the dark. In a criminal psychology text, this is called the mask of sanity. It's a concept developed by Dr. Hervey Cleckley to describe the personality of a psychopath. He wrote that they can present a convincing mask of normalcy that is often charming and engaging. The mask hides a complete lack of empathy, a profound inner emptiness. It is not a conscious deception, but their very nature. Silas Croft was wearing that mask. The Bennetts, tired from the road, saw only a kind stranger offering a clean bed for the night. I saw the way his eyes lingered on my wood-paneled sides, on the packed luggage visible through my rear window, on the shape of the family itself. It was not the appreciative glance of a fellow traveler, but the assessing gaze of a collector. He helped them carry a bag to their room, his movements solicitous, almost reverent. The door to room 7 closed, and a single light came on in the window. I was alone in the gravel lot, under a sky choked with stars. I waited. That is what I was built to do. I waited for the morning light, for the sound of their voices, for the familiar weight of them settling inside me to continue our journey. But the night stretched on, a long black canvas, and the only sound was the lonely buzz of the motel sign flickering on and off, like a warning that had come too late. What do you think? Did the Bennetts have any chance, or was their fate sealed the moment they took that exit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Morning arrived not with the gentle warmth I was used to, but with a sharp, cold light that made the peeling paint of the motel look even more desolate. The sun rose higher. Other travelers, the occupants of rooms 3 and 9, emerged, their cars starting with a cough of exhaust before pulling back onto the main road. Soon, I was the only vehicle left in the gravel lot. The door to room 7 remained shut. I waited. The sun climbed to its zenith, beating down on my roof, the heat turning my interior into an oven. The smell of the family, Laura's perfume, the faint sweetness of Chloe's bubblegum, was still trapped inside me, a ghostly presence. But the family themselves were gone. Where were they? My systems are simple. I have no concept of worry, only of routine and its disruption. My routine had been broken. As the afternoon shadows began to lengthen, a new and terrible sound reached me. The sound of the door to room 7 opening, but with the wrong hands. Silas Croft emerged, carrying a bucket and mop. He did not look at me. He entered the room and closed the door. A long while later, he came out again, locking the door behind him with a key. He still did not look at me. The day bled into another night. The neon sign buzzed, crickets chirped, the stars wheeled overhead. It was on the second morning that the violation occurred. Silas Croft walked directly toward me. In his hand, he held my keys. This is a critical moment in any missing persons case. Law enforcement experts call it the golden hours, the first 24 to 48 hours after a disappearance. According to a study by the Department of Justice, in cases of stranger abduction homicide, 76 of the victims are killed within the first 3 hours. By the time Silas Croft held my keys, the Bennetts were statistically unlikely to be alive. But statistics don't account for the unique cruelties of individual predators. Silas wasn't a typical killer. He was a collector, and his collection had only just begun. I felt the cold intrusion as he slid the key into my driver's side door. The lock tumbled. He opened the door and slid into the seat where David was supposed to be. The wrong weight, the wrong smell, the wrong presence. My systems recoiled. He turned the ignition. My engine, silent for 2 days, roared to life with a sound that felt like a scream. He did not turn me toward the highway, toward Oregon, toward our future. He steered me around the back of the motel, onto a dirt track that was little more than 2 ruts in the dry earth. We bumped and jolted over the uneven ground, dust billowing behind us, erasing our tracks. I was being stolen. With every turn, we went deeper into the wilderness, farther from any road, any town, any hope. The scent of the Bennetts was still with me, a fading, desperate perfume on the stale air. I was carrying their ghosts away from the world, into a final, suffocating silence. The dirt track ended at a place that time had forgotten. A dilapidated homestead, the house a skeletal ruin, but the barn somehow still stood. It was a great, cavernous structure of weathered gray wood, its roof sagging in the middle like a tired old man's back. Silas Croft steered me through the massive, groaning doors and into the barn's deep darkness. He turned my engine off. The silence that followed was different from the silence of the motel. It was thick, heavy, and smelled of hay rot, animal musk, and generations of neglect. He got out, and I heard his footsteps recede. Then a new sensation. A heavy, rough canvas was thrown over my roof, draping down over my windows, sealing me in a suffocating, scratchy shroud. The world went from dim to black. The final sound was the immense groaning complaint of the barn doors being dragged shut, followed by the heavy thud of a wooden beam being dropped into place. And then, nothing. This was the beginning of the long sleep. Time ceased to be measured by the sun and became a succession of sensations filtered through my new prison. I learned the sound of the wind as it shrieked through the cracks in the barn's walls, a high, mournful cry. I learned the patter of rain on the tin roof, sometimes a gentle drum, other times a furious roar. I felt the tiny scratching footsteps of mice as they explored my hood and roof, their small bodies a fleeting warmth against my cold steel. years turned into a slow, inexorable process of decay. There's a term in forensics called taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized. It's often used for dinosaur bones, but it applies to crime scenes too. A car in a dark barn is a unique taphonomic environment. Without sunlight, my paint faded slowly. Without moisture, rust was a patient, creeping disease rather than a rampant cancer. The evidence inside, the fingerprints, the hair, the smell, was being preserved in a state of suspended animation. It's a chilling thought. The very act of hiding me was what would ultimately allow me to speak. Silas Croft, in his attempt to erase the Bennetts from the world, had inadvertently created the perfect time capsule of his crime. I felt the air grow damp in the winter, the chill seeping into my very frame. I felt the dry, baking heat of summer that cracked my dashboard and turned my leather seats brittle. The canvas over me grew heavy with dust and bird droppings. Cobwebs stitched me to the darkness, lacing my bumpers and my tires, binding me to this place. I was no longer the wanderer. I was a coffin, a steel tomb holding the last tangible traces of a vanished family. The outside world became a myth, a memory of light and motion. My existence shrank to the four walls of this barn, to the oppressive weight of the darkness, to the slow, patient surrender to dust and rust. I held my silence, a silent metal witness to an absence that had no name. Inside my silent shell, the ghosts of the Bennetts fought a losing battle against time. For the first few years, their scent was a powerful presence. I could still smell Laura's faint, flowery perfume on the passenger side seatbelt. I could still detect the phantom aroma of David's coffee, a ghost in the fibers of the carpet beneath the driver's seat. But slowly, inevitably, they began to fade. The potent smells of the barn-damp earth, decaying wood, the sharp tang of rodent nests began to seep in, overwriting the delicate tapestry of my family's presence. My memories, however, did not rust. In the long, unbroken darkness, I replayed them. The sensation of the open road, the weight of Sam's sleeping form in the back, the sound of Chloe's voice as she pointed out a hawk circling in the sky. These were not thoughts, but physical echoes in my frame, a vibration in my chassis that I clung to against the stillness. I held on to one secret, one physical piece of them that the dust had not yet claimed. The day they vanished, in the small chaos of their arrival at the motel, Chloe had dropped something. A small, leather-bound book, no bigger than a man's hand. It had slipped between the passenger seat and the center console, landing on the floor in a place of perfect shadow. It was her diary. This is what investigators call a totem of memory. It's a single, emotionally charged object that serves as a central clue and a symbol of the victim's identity. In the famous case of Jacob Wetterling, a boy abducted in Minnesota in 1989, his story became synonymous with the search for justice for missing children. The case remained cold for nearly 27 years until his remains were found. For his mother, Patty Wetterling, the totem was hope itself. She became a tireless advocate, helping to create national laws to protect children. She once said, "Hope is not a strategy. It's a verb. It's an action. It's something you do." For the Bennett case, there was no unwavering seeker like Patty Wetterling. There was only me. And the totem of memory I guarded was not hope, but a final written testament. I knew its texture, the feel of its smooth cover against my carpet. I had felt its slight weight shift as I was driven down that terrible dirt road. It was the one piece of her that remained, a totem of memory tucked away in my belly. It was a silent testament, a book of whispers waiting for a reader. As the years bled into decades, the diary became my anchor. It was the heart of the family that I still carried. While the world outside forgot, while a cold case file gathered dust in some forgotten cabinet, I guarded my secret. I held the key, not in my ignition, but in the small, forgotten space between my seats, waiting for a day I had no reason to believe would ever come. A day when the darkness would break. 35 years. A generation. I had measured the time in the slow thickening of the dust, in the gradual sag of my springs, in the silent crumbling of the barn around me. I had come to believe that the darkness was my final state. Then came the sound. It was not the familiar scuttling of mice or the moan of the wind. It was a human sound. A metallic scrape, followed by a splintering crack. A groan of old rusted hinges being forced to move against their will. And then it happened. A vertical line of brilliant, painful light appeared. The great barn door was being opened. The light sliced through the gloom, hitting the dust.
Choked air and making it glitter. It was blinding, an assault on the senses after an eternity of black. I saw two figures silhouetted against the opening. They were young, their movements quick and full of a nervous energy that felt alien in this place of stillness. Urban explorers, drawn by the romance of decay. They stepped inside, their footsteps hesitant on the dirt floor. Their voices were hushed, reverent. "Whoa," one of them breathed. "Look at this place." Their eyes adjusted to the dimness, and then they saw me. A gasp. This is the accidental breakthrough, a recurring motif in so many cold cases. It's almost never the police who find the critical clue years later. It's a hiker who veers off a trail, a construction crew digging a new foundation, or, in this case, a pair of kids with a camera and a sense of adventure. In the case of the Green River Killer, one of America's most prolific serial murderers, a key break came when a man fishing in the river snagged his line on something. He pulled it up. It was a human bone. That single accidental discovery eventually led to the unmasking of Gary Ridgway. The truth has a way of rising to the surface, often through the most mundane and unexpected means. The girl, her hair a bright shock of pink, slowly approached. She reached out a tentative hand and wiped a clean streak through the thick mantle of grime on my driver's side window. She peered inside. "It's a station wagon," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "A classic. What is it doing out here?" The boy pulled out a phone, its screen an impossibly bright rectangle. He began taking pictures. The flash, a series of silent white explosions that illuminated my rust-pocked chrome and flattened tires. They circled me, their flashlights probing my interior, revealing the cracked dashboard, the faded upholstery, the empty space where a family used to be. They did not know what they had found. To them, I was a relic, a cool, forgotten treasure. But their presence, the intrusion of the living into my tomb, was a cataclysm. They had broken the seal. They had let the world back in. The long silence was over. The explorer's curiosity soon gave way to a sense of unease. The isolation of the place, the strange preservation of my form within the decaying barn, it all felt wrong. The boy made a call. His voice was low, but I heard the words clearly. "Sheriff's Department? Yeah, my name is Alex. My friend and I are out at the old Croft property off Route 287. We found something you should probably see." The wait that followed was different. It was not the patient, eternal waiting of the cold years. It was a tense, charged silence, thick with anticipation. Soon, I heard the distant but growing siren, a noise I had not heard in a lifetime. 2 police cruisers crunched to a stop outside the barn. The flashing lights, red and blue, pulsed through the open doors, painting the interior in frantic, strobing colors. A woman stepped out of the lead car. She was tall, her hair pulled back tightly, her face etched with a kind of weary competence. She moved with a purpose that commanded the space. This was Detective Nora Kincaid. She took in the scene, the barn, the explorers, and me. Her eyes lingered on my license plate, a faded rectangle of metal caked with 35 years of dirt. She spoke into the radio on her shoulder, her voice calm and steady. "Dispatch, this is Kincaid. I'm at the old Croft homestead. I have a 1988 Ford Country Squire wood paneling, Ohio plates. License is Baker.Franklin.Lincoln619. A moment of static, and then a voice crackled back, tinny and distant. "Stand by, Detective." In a fascinating case study on the evolution of policing, it's noted how much technology has changed, but how much the core process has not. In 1988, a check like this would have involved a dispatcher manually looking through microfiche records. Today, systems like the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, can cross-reference data in seconds. It's a vast digital library of the nation's lost and wanted. A BOLO alert, be on the lookout, can now persist for decades, a digital ghost waiting for a ping. The silence stretched. Detective Kincaid walked slowly around me, her gaze missing nothing. Then the radio crackled again, the voice now imbued with a new urgency. "Detective Kincaid, be advised, that vehicle is a positive match. It's flagged in connection with the Bennett family disappearance. Hale County, Ohio, PD. Case file from August of 1988. The vehicle and 4 occupants vanished without a trace. It's been on the BOLO list for 35 years. Detective Kincaid stood motionless, her eyes fixed on me. I was no longer an abandoned car. I had a name. I was the Bennett family's car. The world had finally remembered. I was a crime scene. My removal from the barn was a slow, reverent process. A flatbed truck arrived, and I was carefully winched from my resting place, my flattened tires groaning in protest. Seeing the full, open sky for the first time in a generation was a shock. The world was brighter, louder, faster than I remembered. I was taken to a secure, climate-controlled garage, a sterile white space that smelled of concrete and disinfectant. Here, the real work began. I became the sole focus of a team of people dressed in white coveralls. They moved with a quiet, methodical precision that was both a violation and a relief. They were not tourists or trespassers. They were readers, and I was their book. They documented everything. Photographs were taken from every conceivable angle. They laid a grid of strings over my interior, mapping my space like an archaeological dig. They took samples of the dust that had been my shroud for so long. Every surface was a potential witness. They gently scraped under the children's fingernail-sized prints on the windows. They used tweezers to lift single strands of hair from the headrests. David's dark brown, Laura's blonde, Chloe's light brown. These were the ghosts I had held onto, now being carefully collected and labeled. Dr. Henry Lee, one of the world's foremost forensic scientists, has a famous guiding principle. Every contact leaves a trace. This is known as Locard's exchange principle. It's the bedrock of modern forensics. The perpetrator of a crime will bring something into the crime scene and leave with something from it, and both can be used as forensic evidence. In this case, I wasn't just the crime scene. I was the container for countless microscopic exchanges. The most intimate examination was reserved for the driver's area. They took swabs from my steering wheel, where David's hands had gripped me tight with excitement and perhaps with fear. They lifted fingerprints from the radio dial, last tuned to a station that had likely ceased to exist. They carefully vacuumed the fibers of my carpet, their machines humming a low, mournful song as they collected the microscopic debris of a family's last journey. A breadcrumb, a grain of sand from a rest stop hundreds of miles away, a single iridescent sequin from one of Chloe's shirts. I was giving up my secrets, piece by painful piece. I was a time capsule being cracked open, and the contents were the last echoes of 4 people who had stepped out of my doors one summer night and into oblivion. What do you think is the most important piece of evidence they could find? A fingerprint? A hair? Or something else entirely? The forensic team was thorough, but it was Detective Kincaid who made the discovery that changed everything. While the technicians in their white suits focused on the visible surfaces, she was interested in the spaces between. She had a sense, an investigator's intuition, that a car that had held a family for so long would have its own hidden pockets of memory. With a flashlight, she meticulously examined the gaps around my seats. And there, tucked deep between the passenger seat and the center console, her light caught the edge of dark leather.
"Hold on," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the garage. "I've got something here." Using a pair of long, delicate tongs, she carefully extracted the object. It was small, its cover warped by years of changing temperatures, but it was unmistakably a book. Chloe's diary. In the sterile environment of the lab, under a bright, unforgiving light, Detective Kincaid gently opened the fragile journal. I could not see the words, but I watched her face as she read. I saw her professional composure give way to a flicker of profound sorrow. I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the edge of the table. The Diary of Anne Frank, perhaps the most famous journal in history, was a voice from the attic, a testament to hope in the face of absolute evil. In it, she wrote, "I can shake off everything as I write. My sorrows disappear. My courage is reborn." For a child, a diary is not just a record of events. It's a confidant. It's a safe place to put the things you cannot say out loud. Chloe's diary was not a testament to hope, but a record of its final, terrifying extinguishment. The diary's final entries were written in a child's looping, earnest cursive. They detailed the long, boring drive across Nebraska. Then they described the stop in Havenwood, Wyoming. Chloe's wrote about the motel and about the man who ran it. "Mr. Croft was nice at first," the entry read. "He gave Sam a piece of candy. But his eyes were funny. He kept smiling, but his eyes didn't smile.
He told Daddy our car was the most beautiful he'd ever seen, and he wanted to keep it. The last entry was written in a hurried, panicked scrawl. The letters were shaky, pressed hard into the page. "Mommy and Daddy are gone. He came to the door. He said he was taking us to a new home, a better one. I'm scared. I don't want to go." The diary was Chloe's final testimony, a whisper that had waited 35 years in the dark to be heard. It gave the investigation a name, a face, and a direction. The monster was no longer a phantom. His name was Silas Croft. The name Silas Croft transformed the investigation from a cold case into a manhunt, albeit for a ghost. Records showed that Silas had died of a heart attack nearly 15 years prior, at the age of 72. He had lived and died a recluse on the property where I was found, a man the nearby town of Havenwood barely remembered. He was the quiet, strange man at the edge of town, the one you didn't bother. He had no criminal record, no family, nothing to suggest the darkness he harbored. Detective Kincaid was undeterred. "He didn't just start with the Bennetts," she said to her team, her voice grim. "Men like this have a history. We just have to find it." While a warrant was secured to excavate the entire Croft property, Kincaid's team dug into the digital archives. They cross-referenced missing persons reports from the 1970s and 80s with traveler logs and motel guest books from the region. A pattern began to emerge, faint at first, then chillingly clear. This investigative technique is often referred to as linkage analysis. It's a cornerstone of the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VCAP. The program operates on a simple, terrifying premise: that the behavior of a serial offender is a ritual. They may change their location, but their methods, their choice of victim, their signature often remains the same. By feeding case details into the VCAP database, investigators can find links between seemingly unrelated crimes across different states and jurisdictions. Detective Kincaid was building her own VCAP database, one old-fashioned motel ledger at a time. A family of 3 vanished near Cheyenne in 1979. A newlywed couple disappeared on their way to California in 1984. A father and daughter gone without a trace in 1992, years after the Bennetts. All had last been seen in or around Havenwood. All had been driving distinctive vehicles: a bright red convertible, a classic pickup truck. Silas Croft was not just a killer. He was a collector. He collected families, and he collected their cars, the symbols of their freedom and mobility. As the evidence mounted, the decision was made to move me from the forensic garage. My work as a primary source was done. I was hitched to a tow truck, my body feeling ancient and weary. As I was pulled from the garage and into the daylight, I saw the sky again. It was a clear, brilliant blue, the same color as the sky on that last good day. But it brought me no comfort. My journey wasn't over. I was being taken back to the Croft property, not as a tomb, but as a silent sentinel, to watch as the earth was finally forced to give up the rest of its terrible secrets. Returning to the Croft property was a surreal experience. The place was no longer a forgotten ruin. It was a sprawling, active nerve center. A mobile command post had been set up. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape that fluttered in the constant Wyoming wind. I was parked near the barn, a silent metal observer to the grim proceedings. The centerpiece of the operation was a team with ground-penetrating radar. They moved in a slow, meticulous grid across the property,
their machines sending silent pulses into the dry, packed earth. Their screens, which I could see from a distance, would occasionally flash with color, indicating an anomaly, a disturbance in the soil that shouldn't be there. The first major hit was about 50 yards from the barn, near a stand of gnarled cottonwood trees. A small backhoe was brought in, its engine a low growl. It began to scrape away the topsoil with a surgeon's precision. I watched, my metal frame humming with a strange, resonant dread. The first thing they found was not human. It was metal, the rusted chrome bumper of a car, a 1978 Chevrolet Corvette. Further digging revealed the rest of the vehicle, crushed and buried. Inside, they found what remained of a young couple. A team of forensic anthropologists was brought in to assist. One of them, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, later gave a public statement. She said, "When we excavate a scene like this, we are reading a story, written in the language of bones and soil. The way a body is positioned, the artifacts found with it, the stratigraphy of the earth above it, it all tells us something." Mr. Croft wasn't just disposing of bodies. He was curating a private, subterranean museum of his crimes. The search continued. The radar identified 2 more sites. Each time, the backhoe was brought in. Each time, a vehicle was unearthed. A Ford F-150 pickup, a Volkswagen Beetle. Each one was a metal coffin containing the victims of Silas Croft's silent, decades-long reign of terror. The final anomaly was the largest. It was in the field behind the ruined homestead. Here the digging was slower, more delicate. And then they found them. 4 souls buried together. The team fell silent. Detective Kincaid removed her hat. Even from a distance, I knew. The earth, after 35 years, was giving back what it had taken. It was giving back David, Laura, Chloe, and Sam. The Bennett family had been found. My long vigil was over. In the quiet of the command post, with the wind howling outside, Detective Kincaid laid it all out, all the pieces, the whispers from Chloe's diary, the forensic evidence from my interior, the grim discoveries buried in the soil, were woven together into a complete and horrifying tapestry. Silas Croft was a man hollowed out by loneliness. His personal effects, found in the decaying house, included photo albums filled with pictures of strangers, families cut from magazines. He craved the family life he never had, but his desire was a twisted, possessive thing. He didn't want to join a family. He wanted to own one, to freeze it in time. His method was cruelly simple. He would target families in distinctive cars, travelers weary from the road, lured in by his false kindness. He would incapacitate them, likely in the motel room, and then bring them back to his isolated kingdom. Chloe's diary entry was the key. He said he was taking us to a new home. For a short time, he would play out his sick fantasy, keeping them alive on his property. The FBI has a term for this type of offender: a power-assertive killer. In a case study published in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence, profilers noted that these individuals are often motivated by a need for control and mastery over their victims. The crime isn't about the act of killing itself, but about the domination and possession it represents. Silas Croft's fantasy was about having a perfect, compliant family that he could control completely. The fantasy always shattered. People are not dolls. They have will. They have fear. They fight back. When they broke character, when they were no longer the perfect family in his mind, he would kill them. And then he would bury them, and he would entomb their cars, the beautiful vessels of their lives, like a pharaoh burying treasures with his dead. My own role in this was terrifyingly clear. The fingerprints they lifted from my steering wheel were a perfect match to Silas Croft. The fibers found in my back seat matched the carpets in his home. I was the vehicle that had transported the Bennetts to their final resting place. I was the last thing they had known of their old lives and the first part of their nightmare. The truth, pieced together after so many years of silence, was so much worse than a simple random act of violence. This was methodical, patient, and repeated evil, hiding in plain sight, masked by the vast, indifferent emptiness of the American West. The case of the Bennett family and of the other souls lost to Silas Croft was officially closed. The news stories called it a triumph of cold case investigation, a testament to the persistence of one detective and the power of new technology. For the families of the victims, it was a release, a painful closure that allowed them to finally bring their loved ones home. The Bennetts were buried in Oregon, the state they had dreamed of but never reached, under a sky that promised green. And what of me? The wanderer, the witness. After the investigation concluded, I was towed one last time, away from the scarred earth of the Croft property. I was taken to a sprawling, fenced-in impound lot, a city of forgotten vehicles. I was parked in a long row, flanked by cars mangled in accidents and others seized in crimes. My purpose was served. My secrets had been told. The forensic teams had cleaned me, stripping away the last physical traces of my family, of the dust from the barn, of the evil of Silas Croft. I was sterile now, empty. The ghosts in my upholstery were gone, their stories finally released into the world. There's a field of study called material culture, which examines the relationship between people and their things. A leading theorist in the field, Daniel Miller, wrote that objects aren't just tools. They are an active part of our lives, shaping us as we shape them. I am a product of that theory. I wasn't just a car. I was an extension of the Bennett's family's hopes, their journey, their final moments. Now that connection is severed. I no longer dream of the open road or the sound of children's laughter. My memories are now quiet, like images in a dusty photo album that has been put away on a high shelf. I am no longer a vessel of memory, just a shell of steel and glass. Sometimes new detectives, young ones, walk the rows of the impound lot. They look at me, at my classic lines and faded wood paneling, and they see a piece of history. They know my story. I am the car that held a secret for 35 years. I am a testament to the fact that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of rising to the surface. I wait now. Not for a family, not for a journey, but simply for an end. For the crusher, or the slow, final surrender to rust. The silence has returned, but it is different now. It is not the silence of a secret being kept. It is the silence of a story that has, at long last, been told. The silence of the Sparrow Creek Motel was finally broken, not by a scream, but by the quiet turning of a page in a child's diary. Justice, carved from rust and sorrow, arrived 35 years late. The earth gives back what it takes, but it never returns the years that were stolen. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other secrets lie waiting under the dust in forgotten places, held by silent witnesses, just like that old station wagon? If you believe that every story deserves to be heard, and that no name should stay forgotten, don't forget to subscribe to Deep End Stories and hit the notification bell. You become part of the search for truth. Thank you for watching Deep End Stories.